Hey, it's Jane Boyd, and I'm really excited to be here for a 45 Conversations discussion with Rita Romeo. And we're going to be talking today about what's happening in the East Kootenay region of British Columbia. There's a childcare needs assessment that's going on there, and Rita is with the Childcare Resource and Referral in the region. Hi, Rita, how are you today?
Good. How about yourself, Jane?
I am great. It's really
Good.
delightful to have you in this conversation and to talk about this important issue that's happening, throughout your region.
It is. And
Yeah.
also a good time for it.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. So, for folks who are kind of tuning in and watching, this conversation, let's just start sort of with the very basic beginnings, where talk about sort of where it is that you're based and a little bit about the region that you work in.
Okay. So East Kootenay Childcare Resource and Referral. We cover the East Kootenay Basin, except for Golden, who has their own CCRR. But we would cover communities like Creston, the Elk Valley, Windermere Valley, and then Cranbrook, Kimberley, and areas in between.
Okay, all right. So it's quite a large region in a lot of ways, and I've
It
had the joy of visiting your region. It's a beautiful region, multiple times over the last year or so, and I mean, it strikes me that there's a lot of very interesting things going on in the region just based on the fact that it is so large, right? And geographically spread out for families. And can you explain a little bit about that? Because we're obviously going to talk about childcare needs, but I
okay.
think the region itself impacts that in some ways, right?
And it does. And because we are such a large region, you have, like in the Creston area, there's the fruits and the laborers are coming in for seasonal work. Then we've got two large ski resorts in this area, three of them actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you have those seasonal things happening. And then also just because of the summertime, a lot of lakes and stuff around here. So we have a lot of people coming in from the other areas, if not for holidaying, at least coming in for work during those seasonal times.
Right, right, yeah. And so, I mean, obviously, seasonal work is an interesting kind of situation when we think about childcare issues, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then, of course, there's, the resource sector is quite large as well, and in terms of employment opportunities as well for folks. So, all of those things kind of present interesting things from a childcare perspective. The other thing that stood out to me, of course, is that you do have quite a cold winter, right? So
Yes.
yes, is that I don't know if that's an understatement. I'm from Vancouver, so we don't we have a rainy winter, right?
Yeah, we've got a cold one, lots of
Yeah,
snow.
lots of
We usually have
snow.
about 8 months of winter,
Right.
and then
Okay,
2 months of
but this
spring
is
and summer.
this is an important factor, right?
It
Because
is. It is.
winter elements and I have to say I did live in Prince Edward Island for 2 years, and the time that I was there, I think it was the worst winter that they'd had in 100 years. So
Wow.
I definitely know, what beyond a blizzard is, and a good
Yes.
old nor'easter and all of that. Um, but I guess there's a lot of you know, geographically within your region, of course, you're in the mountains a lot of
Yes.
the area. So for families who are driving to work and childcare and school and all of that, weather is a factor, right? It is a factor,
It is.
and not
It
only
is.
transportation is a factor. I think when you factor in weather as well.
Exactly. And I know even when we have families phoning in and looking for childcare, to them, if they're moving from another community, an hour commute isn't a big deal because they're thinking
Right,
it's within a community, within a city. But
right,
here it's an hour to another community and you're traveling on the highway and there's icy roads during the winter.
right.
It's a different perspective when people understand that because they think, oh, it's only, a few minutes away. Well, it
That's
can be,
right.
but depending on the weather and yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
you're
And
right.
certainly as I've talked with folks that live and work in the region, I mean this is a major part of the issue for them
It
in
is.
terms of having access to choices for childcare, but then factoring in all of the logistics that perhaps in more urban areas that aren't affected in the same way by, weather and driving conditions, it kind of shifts things a little bit. So
It does.
it's a unique, it's not, this is Canada, so clearly,
Yeah.
it's not as though you are the only place that has,
No.
significant winters. And but it's important, I think, when we factor into the kinds of things that families face and that childcare providers and those who are working in the field kind of have to deal with, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about, in your role as the child care resource and referral, you're sort of the place that families come to when they're looking for childcare in your region. That's a big part of what it is that you do, right?
It is. It's the major role, one of the major roles that we do.
Mm-hmm.
We do support the childcare providers, of course,
Right.
but many families phone us looking for childcare, and also with the childcare subsidy program. There are a few other things that we provide, but mostly the childcare referral service.
Right. So, talk to me a little bit about that because, part of with this project, we're really trying to understand, okay, what are the needs? What are the issues that are happening
Hmm.
in your
Okay.
region so that we can look at, potential opportunities and understand the challenges? Tell me a bit about
Okay.
what you're hearing from families.
And again, it's different depending on where the families are living.
Right.
So the different communities that they do live in, because then in some of our outreach communities, they may be able to transport their child for another 20 minutes, half an hour, because that is the closest childcare that's
Right.
to them. So that's an option. But in our area, a lot of families, it depends on their hours of work,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're needing evening and weekend type hours as well.
Okay.
And we don't have a lot of childcare providers that are offering evening and weekend.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them, it's the transportation bit only because they may not have transportation themselves. So they're going to
Right.
have to depend on the bus system, which isn't available in every
In
community.
every community.
Cranbrook,
Okay.
no, Cranbrook
Yeah.
has their own, and I don't believe too many of the smaller communities have anything like
Okay.
that.
So that's a significant issue. I mean,
It
in
is.
terms of if there is no public transportation, then how do you get to
Yes,
childcare if you're not, driving in a vehicle, right? So that's a whole
exactly.
coordination piece for
A whole
families for
other
sure.
issue.
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, same with the shift working, like a
Yes.
lot of families that are doing shift work or the
Right.
evening work, and a lot of providers, it's hard for them to hold spaces for these families because they're only
Right.
needing them every other week or, every 2 weeks. And
Right.
so sometimes they can flex some children in that have the same situation happening,
Mm-hmm.
but it's rarely that that does happen.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
scheduling for families is not easy depending on their hours of work, where they're working, hours of operation of the facilities, because
Mm-hmm.
most of them are the general 8 to 5 or,
Right. Right.
7 to 3 or something. They do have some interesting hours, so that could.
Right. So that's so there's a number of different things that you've identified there
Hmm.
that are tricky things that are
Hmm.
happening that are part of I think what's going on in the region. And you've also talked about ways that childcare providers are in some ways trying to help to support those
Yes,
challenges, by matching up and
that's right.
sharing spaces and families in different ways.
They do.
What kinds of things do you hear from the childcare providers and operators themselves in terms of the issues that they are grappling with?
With them right now, I think one of the bigger issues is the age group. We
Okay,
have, for whatever reason, infant toddler care and school age care, they're quite full right now. So we do
okay,
have spaces in the 3 to 5 year olds, which is unusual because in the past
okay,
there was nothing for 3 to 5 and there were
right,
spaces for the older and the younger. So again, I see that wave happening where in a
right.
year or two it's going to be back to
That's right.
there being
Yeah,
lots of spaces.
yeah,
So for them filling up all their spaces because of those age restrictions that they have with licensing,
right.
which they have to follow, that does make it harder because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the families right now either have infant or toddlers that are looking for care.
Right.
So the age is an issue for sure.
So infant families with infants and toddlers are having challenges finding care.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
period. And that
Period.
I
Okay.
can pretty much say that's across the board.
All right.
For 3 to 5, there definitely are more spaces for that age group, but for
Okay.
infant, toddler, and school age, it's a little harder in some areas. Again,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the region and where
Right.
you're at, it does
Right.
fluctuate. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And
Um,
anything else that stands out to you? I mean, like I've certainly heard a number of things about attracting and recruiting and retaining
Oh,
qualified staff. So that's, what are your thoughts on that?
that is one of the biggest
Right.
holdbacks for a lot of group programs. Actually, what a lot of programs have had to do is because they've had less staff available to work or to even cover
Mm-hmm.
sick time, holidays, those types of things, they've actually had to limit their numbers down to only 8 or 12, depending
Okay.
on the group. So the group sizing, although the program may be available for 20, technically they may only accept 8 to 12
Right.
or
So they're
16,
not
depend
able to operate at
at
capacity
full
due
capacity.
due
No.
to a shortfall in qualified staff.
Exactly. And unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
in this last year, two programs in Cranbrook itself has had two group programs have had to close their doors
Wow.
due
Okay.
to lack of staff.
Hmm. So what are some ways when you kind of think about that, and do you have thoughts on ways to address that issue? And I mean, I know that that's a
Um,
loaded question, right? Like there's, like we're not going
exactly.
to solve it all in this conversation, Rita. But,
No, I hear,
but
I can tell you what I hear from
for
people.
sure,
So
yeah,
what
please
people have
do.
shared is it's either getting themselves educated is hard,
Right.
just
Okay.
because of so that's one point. Even with the online type programs and such, sometimes they only run at certain times, so
Mm-hmm.
that could still be an issue for some of them.
Right.
The other issue I think is the
Okay.
wages, of course, of the early childhood educators.
Mm-hmm. Can you give a sense of what wages are? I mean, even just a range of what?
In our region, it's between 12 to, I'd say, maybe 18 on
Okay.
15, 16 on average, and then higher for some areas,
Right. Right.
up to 20, maybe only in a few certain
Right.
areas, but it's
Right.
still around the $15 mark
Mm-hmm.
range.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, and then long hours, because they do
Right.
have long days,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those days don't necessarily mean that they have their regular breaks like anyone
Right.
else, where they
Right.
can leave and such. So there's a lot of work and a lot of,
Mm-hmm. And burnout, I think, right?
yeah,
I mean,
it's
I know of stories from programs and individuals in the region who, I can think of one situation where, it's been years since they've actually had, a break of any
right.
description, right? They're
Hmm.
eating their lunch with the children.
Exactly.
It's, very, very challenging. And I think that if we compare that to other kinds of employment and jobs that individuals would have, getting the opportunity to at least have a break and uh, eat your lunch, right, in
That's right.
some capacity,
Yes.
is something that's necessary, right? And so when you're
It
when
is.
you're working with young children to be able to take half an hour and eat your lunch
Mhm.
in peace and step outside and refresh and just, refocus your brain so that you can be back in the very best place that you can. I mean, let's face it, working with children, it can be stressful, it can be hugely rewarding, but it's a very, very busy role when you're trying to, do everything that you can to, support young children in their growth and development.
Exactly. And like a lot of people in that caring field type perspective, they do it, right?
Yes.
Over and above what they actually maybe should be doing
Right.
because they know
Yeah.
what's out there, what's needed. So
Exactly.
we've been fortunate with a few programs actually do have that option where they do have extra staff coming in to cover and stuff, but that's pretty rare.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you're right.
Yeah.
It's hard. And so then a few of our childcare providers have chosen to go into other fields only because then their income level obviously
Mhm.
goes up.
Mhm.
So they could be going into the school system as an EA or education assistant,
Right.
or even just with other programs within the communities like infant development or supported child development, any of
Right.
these other programs out there. Hmm.
So they might enter the field working in a program, but then use it as a stepping stone to
Yeah,
another position that is potentially of higher income and more possibilities for them in terms of career growth.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah, it's
exactly.
very, very tricky. Okay, so what about, can we talk a little bit about providers who choose to, offer care in their home. So whether they're a licensed family daycare or a multi-age, in-home multi-age program, and then of course license not required. I mean, I know that there's some of that going on in the region. I also know that there's a lot of unlicensed, technically illegal care. Talk a little bit about that. What do you see happening in sort of that area?
Okay, and again, we're here to support those that are licensed, not required, those
Right.
that want to be licensed, not required, so they
Yep.
can have up to 2 children
Yes.
or 1 family unit. And we have some families that are willing to do that because it's not necessarily an income-making type business.
Right.
So they're generally the younger moms or the ones that can't find childcare for their own children that are needing to stay home, and then they can have a little bit of income by caring for other children.
For other children, yeah.
Yes, the licensed family, they can have their 7, which is better, and then of course the income level does go up with that.
Yes.
And the regulations, for those that are licensed, not required, we have some regulations that they need to follow, which is similar to licensed.
Right.
Not maybe as extreme in some sense, but they do have to complete all the requirements that licensing folks do as well.
Right.
This is a matter of how many children they're able or willing to care for in their home.
Right.
And we appreciate those people that know their limit as to how many children that they can care for. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah.
And what do you see in terms of, I don't know if success is the right word, but the potential for helping folks who might not be fitting into any of those categories, but are providing care in their home for perhaps more than 2 children without a license? Is there a way to help some of those folks to move towards obtaining a license, or sort of awareness around that? Because certainly I've run across several families who have talked to me about placing their children in care situations such as this, and it's a very delicate subject because for a whole lot of reasons, and especially if they're living in a community where there just is no other choice for them. Families are faced with a very difficult situation, right?
That's right.
So obviously, and I understand in your role, it's very much about supporting, the programs that are the licensed group programs, licensed not required, all of that. But we know that there's some other things that are going on out there. So,
That's right.
Do you have any thoughts as to how we can reach those folks, or things that we could do to kind of perhaps support them in a way to move towards, or what the barriers are, I guess, to them getting there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate because we do support with the child care subsidy program as well. So that's where we generally get to meet those that are doing informal type care or licensed not required type care that aren't registered. Because then that's where we can inform them about the higher subsidy rates that they could receive if they are registered or licensed. We let them know about the lending library and the other resources that we have here. I think for some, depending on the situation, because parents are having such a hard time finding care, that they are depending on family members as well.
Right.
So a lot of them can be grandparents or aunts and uncles that just aren't into going through the full process,
right?
Because then they are there only for those family members, and
right? And that's
a
very different situation.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
and that's their choice, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we support families in whatever choice they make, and we do have information here as well for looking for in-home providers, because again, depending on their hours of work or even the money that's available to them, the options may not be out there for them.
That's right. And so I think it's important for families to know that there are a wide range of options.
Yes.
And then at the end of the day, we're really trying to, especially within this needs assessment and these conversations, to just understand what the issues are, right? So that we can capture as much of that information and pull it together in a way that ultimately, when we get to the sort of the final report with a series of recommendations that we can look to say, okay, here's some opportunities and places that we can move from.
That's right.
Yeah. So any thoughts from your perspective as to interesting opportunities or things that could happen in the community that could make a difference? Like as we go through this, do you see in your role, and in your work with families and providers, little things that could perhaps make a difference?
I think even just the basic sharing of information of the different options that are out there,
Right.
or what's out there, and that families, maybe they have more than one option that they're not aware of. So just keep that communication open, because we have a lot of families that come in that don't know about the childcare subsidy program.
Right.
So
Okay.
they've been struggling for years trying to pay for childcare, and then they find out about the program and they're wishing they'd have heard about it earlier. I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot of things out there that could be factored in, and same with getting those other providers out there that maybe should be licensed, because maybe they can provide a good quality licensed family childcare option.
Right.
And
Right.
they're not aware that they can have that many more children, and then again receive a bigger income. I mean, there's a lot of factors. They're running their own business in their home, so there are things
Yes.
that they can claim
Yeah.
as a business. Yeah, there's a lot of information out there. It's getting it out to everyone that's the harder part.
Right, right. And so, I mean, hopefully part of what we're doing here is, we're creating sort of a bit of a legacy of, some stories and conversations and things that, we get some of this into the right hands, and then from there, we're adding to sharing information and stimulating dialogue and conversation around the issues, because that's a huge part of it, right? Sometimes you just you just need to kind of have that dialogue increase, and with that comes a lot of raised awareness around something, right? But so it's an ongoing task, but it's exciting in a lot of ways, right? It's very exciting.
And media is helping for sure.
For sure.
Because then the different media things that are out there, like Google Plus and all these
Yeah,
other things,
absolutely.
and stuff, it's
Yeah.
a great resource.
Yeah, it is. And I certainly see through social media in a lot of ways, say Facebook groups or different things, people they're creatively problem solving sometimes themselves, using, that as a way to connect, right? Through Facebook groups or things like that. So, so there's a lot of different interesting things that are happening. That said, there's some negatives too,
Yes,
right? And I'm sure you're maybe going to go there, right?
Yeah.
So, what
caution to
what cautions would you have with that? Because I think that's an important thing to consider as well.
I think the cautions that I hear more often than not is the number of children that people are actually caring for.
Yes.
That they don't necessarily realize that there is a law that states how many children and the ages of the children that can care for, because a lot of people don't know.
Right. So let's be really clear on that. Talk about what is that, and just go over that, because this is a good opportunity to share that information.
The basic rule of thumb is basically anyone can care for up to 2 children or 1 family unit legally. Anything more than that, then they should be licensed. And that can be licensed family, or again be licensed group, but they would need their early childhood education for that.
Right. Okay. So if someone is in a situation where, there are 4 or 5 children that are attending, and it's not a family unit, but there's four or 5 different families, dropping off, then as a parent, they should be looking to see if if this is a licensed program in some capacity, right?
And then if anything, they would be calling Interior Health, or they could call the Child Care Resource and Referral Program. We could set them up with the number, because it's more educating people.
Right.
A lot of people, they don't necessarily do it intentionally. They're just not aware that there is a license or a law around the number of children.
And so then if they can go through that process, then that opens the doors to, a lot of different kinds of information, knowledge, resources, and even through your program, as you talked about, because you've got a lending library and, all kinds of stuff, right? So you're no longer alone in terms of providing this service. You become part of a community of folks that are, this is what they're dedicated to doing, right?
That's right. And we have the resources and the information here for them to find out about what quality childcare could look like, environment, the different stages that kids could be at and such. So
Right. And so now we talked at the beginning of the call just a bit about, some of the different services that you provide. But if you're, I don't know, let's say you're based in Cranbrook, but some of these other communities, do you do visits out to them, or how, what kind of support do you do in, some of the more remote areas in your region?
Right. So quarterly, we do outreach to them where we can bring them toy lending library items or craft supplies and those types of resources as well. We do provide workshops or training sessions.
Excellent.
We also have regional workshops that happen in Cranbrook just because it is easier to get in presenters and for cost effectiveness to have everyone come
here. Yeah.
And then again, like I said, we have a toy lending library, we've got a craft store, Crafty Creations, the books and resources that are available. We have a family childcare course that people can take.
Right.
So in order to be licensed family childcare, they would need to have their 20-hour responsible adult training. So Childcare Resource and Referral, we can offer that program.
Excellent.
And then that's distance. It's all distance, so it's easier for them. So with the outreach folks, if there is someone that's wanting to be registered or anything like that, then obviously we would make separate trips out there for them to support them.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, definitely a wealth of different kinds of resources and services. So, awareness is key, and really sharing that out there. And then at the same time, through this assessment that we're doing, creating that dialogue, understanding the issues, and then really looking for what those opportunities are to collectively, as a region, work together. And then obviously bigger things factor into that in terms of, how the province addresses childcare issues and, all of those things. I mean, there's always that bigger picture as well, right?
It is, because it's different for every area and every community.
Absolutely.
Everyone is different. Within our region, there could be different perspectives from different communities.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
No, it's great that they have that opportunity to share their stories.
It is. So I guess, this has been a great conversation. I've just, appreciated all of your thoughts on things. I guess, the final question I have for you in terms of a closing thought is, why is it so important that as a society we, invest in good childcare services and important programs that support, young children in our communities?
And that's one of our bases is to promote the quality of childcare for all children, regardless. And for us as early childhood educators, the importance of those early years.
Yes.
The importance of the school years is great, but before they get there, those first few years are the vital years. It's where they learn, it's who they are. And they're pretty much, I'm losing my words here, Brenda, but the way that they act and grow up to be, their personalities are pretty much intact by the time they're 3 years of age. So it's an important time.
It's a very important time.
It's a very important time. It's a big, and it's the busiest time. It's when they're littler, when they're older, things come up. A lot of different things happen.
Yeah, it's very, very important. Wow. Well, thank you so much. I've really appreciated the conversation and, your perspective on things. Clearly, your program is just doing an amazing amount of work in the region, and, it's so valuable to children and families and, childcare providers. It's a really important service that I think helps to bring together a lot of different components of what is necessary for good quality childcare in the East Kootenay region.
Thank you. Yeah. And I look forward to more conversations happening.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.